line of sight to the counter, to the man with the pinned sleeve sitting over his soup, which had arrived now, eating slowly, stretching it out. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then the old man finished his soup. He finished his coffee. He turned the mug over to signal he didn't want a refill, the gesture of someone managing his expenses with care. Ruth brought the check. She watched him reach into his jacket pocket and pull out a small change purse, the kind that snapped shut at the top. He opened it and tipped it. Coins spilled onto the counter. He arranged them in neat piles, quarters first, then dimes, then nickels, then pennies. He counted quietly, his lips moving. He recounted, then looked at the total on the check, then at the coins, then at the check again. "I'm 10 cents short," he said, not with embarrassment, but with the matter-of-fact directness of a man who had long ago decided that shame was a luxury he couldn't afford. "I can bring it next time. I live 2 blocks up. Don't worry about it," Ruth said. "I'll bring it Tuesday," he said firmly. "What's your name?" "Ruth." "I'll bring it Tuesday, Ruth. I always pay my debts." In the booth, Newman had already reached for his wallet. Redford's hand was on his arm. "Don't," Redford said. Newman looked at him. The look held a full argument. "You saw him first. He's at the counter. I'm closer. Let me." "I'll do it," Redford said quietly. "You'll make it obvious," Newman said, same volume, barely moving his lips. "You'll walk up there and he'll know. So will everyone." "No." Newman looked back at the counter, at the old man sitting over his empty soup bowl, at Ruth waiting patiently. "I won't—" He paused. "Ruth will." Redford studied his friend for a moment. Then he released his arm. Newman caught Ruth's eye across the room. He did it with the minimal economy of a man who had spent 30 years communicating across film sets without words. A slight lift of the chin, a glance from his own wallet to the counter, to the old man, a question posed entirely in silence. Ruth understood it completely. She gave a single tiny nod. Newman placed a $5 bill on the edge of the table, folded once. Not showy, just set there. Ruth walked to the register. She made a small show of studying the check, then the register tape, then the old man. "Actually," she said, "I think I added this up wrong. The soup's on special tonight. We do a soup and coffee combo on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It's 50 cents for both." She opened the register. "You've got 15 cents coming back." She placed 3 nickels on the counter. The old man looked at the nickels. He looked at Ruth. "That's not right." "It is," Ruth said, with the full authority of a woman who had been running this counter for 11 years. "I should have told you when you ordered. That's my mistake." The man looked at the coins for another moment, then he picked them up slowly and slipped them into his change purse. "I appreciate that," he said. "You sure you got the math right?" "Positive." He nodded. He buttoned his jacket. He rose from the stool with the deliberate care of a man who had learned to stand up carefully. The cane first, then the body, shifting weight with practiced efficiency. He picked up his hat from the counter and settled it on his head. Before he turned to go, he looked at Ruth. "Good soup," he said. "Glad you liked it. See you Tuesday." He meant the 10 cents. Ruth nodded as if she believed him because she understood that his intention was real, even if the debt was not. He moved toward the door unhurried, the cane tapping a steady rhythm on the linoleum. At the door, he paused and held it for a woman coming in. Then he stepped out into the November dark and was gone. Ruth looked across the room at the booth near the back. Both men were watching the door where the old man had exited. Neither of them was speaking. The $5 bill was still on the edge of the table, exactly where Newman had placed it. She walked over. She picked it up. "His soup and coffee were 85, she said quietly. "The rest is yours." "Keep it," Newman said. He looked at Redford. "Is there anything left of that coffee, or did you drink it all?" "I drank it all," Redford said. Newman signaled for more. Ruth brought the pot. She refilled both cups and walked away. And behind her, she heard them resume the argument about the film, the third act, the second act, the structural problem that one of them had identified and the other refused to concede.
as if the last 4 minutes had not happened, as if it had been so ordinary a thing that it required no acknowledgement, no discussion, no retrospective significance. But Ruth was a person who paid attention, and she had noticed something that she would think about for a long time afterward. When Redford had said, "Don't," when he had stopped Newman from reaching for his wallet and said, "Let me do it," Newman had paused, and in that pause something had passed across his face that Ruth did not have a word for at the time, and only found the word for years later, when she was older and had seen more of what people were capable of. What she had seen on Newman's face in that pause was recognition, not of Redford, whom he recognized every day, recognition of something else, of the impulse itself, of the fact that they had both seen the same thing at the same moment and felt the same pull toward the same response, that they were in this particular way identical. Redford had said, "I'll do it," and Newman had looked at him and said, "You'll make it obvious," and the whole transaction had been rerouted through Ruth because Newman was right. Newman was almost always right about the logistics of these things, about how to do something so that the person it was being done for could receive it with their dignity intact. But the point, Ruth understood, was not who did it or how. The point was the pause before the argument, the pause in which both of them had already decided simultaneously, without consulting each other, that something needed to be done. Ruth told this story once to a local newspaper reporter in 1987. The reporter was doing a piece on neighborhood diners and asked her what she remembered most about the regulars over the years. She mentioned the old man with the pinned sleeve, she had never learned his name, and she mentioned the 2 men in the booth near the back. The reporter asked her to describe what had happened in more detail. She did. The reporter asked if she was sure it was Newman and Redford. Ruth said she had been watching their movies for 15 years and she was sure. The reporter asked what she thought it meant. "I've been working counters for a long time, seen all kinds of people come through, and I'll tell you what I've learned. The people who make a show of being generous aren't usually the generous ones. The generous ones argue about it quietly in a booth and then send you to handle it, so the man at the counter never has to feel anything except lucky." She paused. Newman figured out how to do it right, but Redford saw it first. That part matters too.
The old man came back the following Tuesday. He put 3 nickels on the counter in front of Ruth and said, "I told you I'd bring it." Ruth thanked him and put the nickels in her apron pocket and did not mention that his bill had been settled by someone else entirely, had been settled 2.5 minutes after he walked out the door on a cold November evening by a man in a booth near the back who finished his coffee and went back to arguing about a film and never spoke of it again. She kept the 3 nickels for years. She kept them in a small dish on her kitchen windowsill. She was not entirely sure why. She thought it had something to do with what they represented, not the debt, which had never been real, but the intention behind the debt, the old man's absolute determination to pay what he owed, the specific pride of a person who had given everything he had to give in one chapter of his life and was not going to start accepting charity in another chapter just because the circumstances required it. Newman and Redford were 2 of the most famous men in America in November 1974. Between them, they had appeared on more magazine covers than either could count, been paid more money per film than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes, been written about and photographed and analyzed and celebrated with an intensity that would have undone most people, and had, in smaller ways, undone at various points. They were men who lived in the full glare of public attention, and had each, in their own way, built defenses against it. Newman through speed and competition and the deliberate cultivation of an ordinary life outside the industry, Redford through privacy and mountains and the sustained effort to remain connected to something that fame could not touch. But on a Tuesday evening in 1974, in a diner on 48th Street, something had cut through all of that without effort. An old man counting coins for a bowl of soup, a pinned sleeve, the quiet, matter-of-fact dignity of someone who had given more than anyone had the right to ask, and was now navigating a reduced life with the same steady composure he had once navigated something far worse. Neither Newman nor Redford had discussed it afterward. Neither had needed to. The argument about the film had resumed immediately and had continued through the walk back to their respective cars, and had ended as their arguments always ended, without resolution. The question simply put aside until the next conversation gave them another angle to approach it from. The thing they had seen at the counter was not put aside. It simply became part of what they knew about each other. One more piece of evidence added quietly to the large collection of evidence that 40 years of friendship accumulates for who the other person actually was when it mattered. There is a kind of character that shows itself in large moments, in speeches, in public acts, in the decisions that get written about. And there is a kind that shows itself only in the pause between one moment and the next, in the half-second before either person has spoken, when what you see on someone's face is not what they have decided to do, but what they instinctively want to do, before the calculation, before the logistics, before the question of how to do it without making the person at the counter feel anything except lucky. Newman and Redford in a booth near the back of a diner on a November evening in 1974 were the same person for approximately 3 seconds. The same instinct, the same pull, the same recognition of what the moment required. Ruth saw it. She kept 3 nickels in a dish on her kitchen windowsill because of it. She thought that was enough. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the quiet moments that reveal who people actually are, share it with someone who needs to be reminded what character looks like. And if you want more untold stories from the lives of Hollywood's greatest legends, subscribe, because the moments that tell you everything were never the ones anyone photographed.